And welcome to Triathlete Live here in Kailua, Kona. My name is Emma Kate Lidberry, and I am joined today by the Ironman World legends Dave Scott and Mark Allen. Welcome, guys. It's great to have you on.
Thank you. Awesome to be here.
Yay. We are just 2 days out from the Ironman World Championship, the biggest race of the year. And these guys know a little thing, a thing or two about this race. You both have, between them, they have 12 Ironman World Championship titles, 6 apiece, dating back to 1980, is that right?
That's correct. I'm glad you did your homework, Emma Kate, because you weren't born then, but that's
Actually,
correct.
I was born in 1980.
Oh, were you? Okay, well, you were a wee thing. Yeah.
But yeah, so we are here today to obviously talk about the Iron War. That was 1989, 30 years ago exactly. These guys duked it out shoulder to shoulder for the entire race. You've had a pretty intense rivalry, I mean, up until that point and that race, but I think that race is probably the one that went down in history and obviously has always been referred to as the Iron War. We'll be taking a lot of questions about the Iron War, but don't forget, these guys have decades of experience of triathlon training and racing. They know everything about nutrition, gear, equipment, anything you need to know. They're here for the next hour, and we look forward to hearing your questions, and we'll make sure that we can get as many of them answered as possible. We'll start off with a few that we've had from social media. We've had the stats. Obviously, people love to hear about the race, and people are also interested in what you're still doing, because I know you both have big coaching businesses. But yeah, we'll get to that later. Let's start off with one of my favorite questions that we received was somebody wanted to know, when you think back to that day in 1989, what's the first thing you think of? What's your standout memory? I'm sure they're very different.
You know, there were so many points in the race that could stand out, but for me, the thing that, if I think about that race, this picture that comes in my mind is just Dave and I running together on the Queen K Highway, you know, because here we are, we're out on this gigantic road, and there's nobody else around, and there's this entourage of cars and motorcycles and cameras and everything following us, and we kept bumping into each other. You know, it's like, there's plenty of room out here. But,
share the road, guys.
But yeah, that was my line.
But we kept bumping into each other because neither of us wanted to give an inch or a second. And there was this sense of this silence, like we were enveloped in some kind of bubble. And the entire rest of the world was outside of it. And we were in this thing that was just moving along together. And it was kind of like, it was almost like a dance in a sense, you know, and we were just propelling each other to this level that neither of us had gone before. And there was quiet about it. There was an intensity about it. There was the love of the heat. You were so aware that you were in the Ironman, and it was just overwhelming how it permeates your being. And so anyway, you know, when I think about 89, that's the image that comes back in a split second for me. Right. You know, I mean, if I think about it longer, of course, then I think about earlier in the race on the swim or the bike or different things that happened throughout it, or, you know, the finish, or, you know, the infamous hill where we were, you know, finally things split up. But it's more that thing where we were just together and going and silent, and neither of us were saying a word, because what are you going to say? Hey, Dave, can I get you another drink at the next aid station?
Yeah,
why not?
We'll come back to that, because that's an interesting point. But let's hear Dave's. I want to hear Dave's side of the story too.
Well, I didn't really like the togetherness that we had. It seemed like, as Mark said, you know, we were glued together. I just soon ditch him earlier on, and there was different moments. I mean, the spontaneity of the moment and the race, and really being glued together. There were several times, Mark and I have been covering this in this storyline, 1989thestory.com. Right. And we've talked about this. We are getting close to the race. But, you know, my strategy, as I had done in previous races, that Mark was absolute force going into the race. I certainly recognized his ability. We had collided a couple of races earlier in the year, and it just seemed to set up for this 89 race, and the script was sort of pre-written. But really my strategy, I'll answer your question, was not to have Mark. I didn't need Mark to race well, and I, you know, we had some close races in in the earlier years in the 80s, and I was able to catch him a couple times. And so I thought, I know how to do this race, and I'm not saying this arrogantly, but I don't really need to have this escort service, Mark Allen, next to me. So, but I do remember the, very similar to what Mark just expressed, this huge group. I remember the horns. It reminded me of racing in Europe, where you're kind of surrounded by this background noise, and there's beep beep and a big horn, and then you hear Mark's allies, go Mark, and then an equal number, go Dave, go Dave. And so it kind of went back and forth. And some of the athletes that were coming out on the bike and also on the run, because we're opposing both, or excuse me, finishing the bike, would stop and slow down and yell. And
wow.
And so I kind of saw that in passing, and it almost seemed at that moment that, okay, there's this big race with 1,500 or so behind us, but we were so removed from it. And I'm not saying that arrogantly, it was just that at that moment, it was just the two of us.
And so were there any words exchanged at all that entire time?
Well,
oh, that's a knowing look.
Hey, it's not like, hey, we're in love. Great to have my training mate out here, because we didn't do that. But I do remember this one thing, because at the time I was married, my son was just born, Ryan.
Yep.
He's now 30. He's here with his partner. She's racing the pro division. And I said to Anna, Anna, can you come out? We'd stayed at Anna Lee Drive at a condo, and this little bald infant. I said, well, bring Ryan out there. I'm really excited to see him, if that's a possibility. So as we are running down, we had passed Wolfgang, who was in the lead. I was anticipating her coming out, and sure enough, she was on the sideline. We were scooting along at a pretty fast pace, and I know exactly, because a close friend of mine is sort of a statistician. His background is in physics, and he's always taking notes. And our first 8 miles were at a 5:48 pace per mile, or roughly about 3:40 per K. And so she's coming out with Ryan, she's matching stride with us. And I just felt like, wow, that just gave me the biggest shot of legal adrenaline I could possibly take. And I think at that moment I kind of sped up, and I lost Mark for a moment, and the race itself. And my recollection is Mark said, I think on a humorous note, you can correct me on this, Mark, that's not fair, sort of jokingly. And I don't think I really heard that. But is that right, Mark?
That's right. Dave kind of put it in a nice, tidy little package, though. He made it sound so nice and fun. And I mean, you have to understand, I am trying to match Dave's stride for stride, and that was my strategy that day, was to stay with him, because, like he said, he didn't need anybody to help pace him. He knew how to do it. And so I knew that I didn't know how to pace this race, and I thought, this year I'm just going to try and stick with him as long as I can. No flyers off the front. Learn from the best, right? I mean, going into this race, he had 6 Ironman titles. That's a pretty good calling card.
Right.
And so as we are running through town, I like to sort of build into the marathon. And Dave seemed to be shot out of the cannon right from the first step. But I couldn't, so I was like, okay, don't let this guy go, because I'm going to learn something here. And we were running 5:50, 5:48 pace, and I thought, this is absolute insanity. We're going to completely explode at some point. But I thought, well, hey, I'll go down with the best, right? And I'm barely matching his stride, and I'm kind of just trying to hold it all together and not freak out because we're going so fast. I mean, nobody had run this fast before. And then out of the crowd comes Anna Scott with the beautiful young bundle, Ryan Scott, the newborn baby.
Bravo.
Just a couple months old, and here he is. And so she runs out and she shoves Ryan in front of us, and I'm thinking, okay, that's really not so good for me. And then,
oops. And
then, as if that's not enough, she starts running with us, and she is stride for stride with a baby in her hands, running a 5:48 mile. And I'm thinking, how is this woman doing this incredible feat? I mean, that was more impressive than what we were doing, I thought, actually.
Well, she was a sprinter, a swimmer, so she had those fast twitch going, And we were clipping along, and I think just the momentum and probably my smile from ear to ear at that moment with Ryan in her hands. I did think at the moment, which was kind of crazy, I was thinking, that's probably not a good idea. Our son is getting whiplash with his neck, and this is unhealthy for him. But okay, carry on as long as you can.
And so I could feel Dave just go boom, boom, you know.
Right.
He got this just surge of inspiration from seeing his son, as you know, you would imagine. For sure, it's his first child. It's like, this is really cool, and he's there, and his wife's running with us, and then I go, hey, that is not fair. So that part of the story was perfectly on point.
Well, you know, there are a bunch of pros who refer to that as baby doping. You know, Rasmus Henning, when he had, I think, his 4th or 5th child, and the same thing happened, and he won that, I think it was Abu Dhabi race years ago, and he won that race, you know. And the same with Ben Hoffman. We interviewed Ben Hoffman a few days ago. He's here with his month-old daughter, Josie, and you can see he's just glowing. He's got that. He's baby doping. But no, but seriously, we've on triathlete.com in the weeks leading up to this race, we've been publishing some of your stories from the 1989 thestory.com, the website that you guys launched, which really had some very candid insights into the progression into that Ironman World race. I mean, and I've read them all, and gee, if I'd known then, you know, what was going on, I would never have imagined you guys reached the start line in the shape that you did and have the race that unfolded the way it did. I think to kind of paraphrase all those blogs, I think you guys were just a hot mess, kind of 6 weeks out from 6 weeks out from the race. That you were pretty close to burnout, and you decided you were going to quit triathlon entirely, and you had taken some time off after the birth of your son. So, what led to after 30 years the sort of the candid decision to, you know, tell some of those stories about what was going on in the lead up to the race?
Well, my business partner, Scott Zagarino, who any of you who've been around the sport a long time, you know his name. He's been involved with just about every aspect of being an athlete in the sport to helping sell sponsorships for, you know, Ironman starting triathlon teams, doing fundraising, being part of the ITU board, and you name it, he's been there. And so anyway, he's helping me with my coaching, markallencoaching.com, and he came to me earlier this year, and he said, you know, this is the 30th anniversary of your amazing race that you and Dave had together, and nobody's heard the real stories, because he knows Dave and I, and he goes, there's so much that went on behind the scenes throughout that year that you guys had to deal with, choices you had to make, decisions that had to be put in place, challenges that you had to overcome, that ultimately, if you really look at it and share that, people will go, I don't know how you guys even got to the start line together. Absolutely. To have that incredible event. And he said, you should collaborate on some stories. He said, I'll publish it, I'll put together the website, we'll blend them together, but just write 10 stories. You guys decide what you want to talk about, because it's your stories. Nobody has actually told these. I mean, people have written stuff about the race before, but this is really the first time that Dave and I have put pen to paper and told things that happened to us that we had that probably only our closest friends and family have even known about. And so it's actually been pretty exciting, because I'm learning stuff that I never knew that Dave had to manage. And ultimately, you know, the reason we're doing this is not to pump up ourselves, but more to just share with people that, you know, maybe on the outside it looks like we were these machines that had it all together, and on race day, you know, we were robots. We're humans, and we have to deal with the same things that pretty much everybody else does, and overcome those things that could possibly hold us back, and figure out, how are we going to do this? How am I going to stay on track? How am I going to get back on track when I'm not? And in 1989, thestory.com, today we published the 8th story. There's 2 more, so we wanted to save, you know, the last 2. One is talking about race week, and then the final one will be the real story of the race itself. We wanted to save those till after this year's World Championship, just because, you know, this is what people should be focusing on right now, the 2019 race, and then afterwards we'll give them a little dessert to sample down.
Oh, that's dessert?
Yeah.
I think we should go to the 1987 race. We'll talk about real dessert, okay? The tables were turned. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's fast forward to 2019. Obviously, Ironman World was 30 years ago. Today, we're here 2 days out from the race. It's shaping up to be one hell of a race, isn't it? I mean, the guys' field and the women's field, extremely deep. Who are your podium picks?
Oh, I don't really like that question, Emma Kate, but because it's sort of, it puts the talent on a spot as if we have the crystal ball. And, I think everyone that's in the background here would also have their picks. And you have to look historically at what they've done here at this race. A lot of people don't know how to win in Kona. So you have to look at the champions. And obviously Daniela Reef is remarkable, and Mark and I have seen her in all different situations. And those of you that were following the race last year, I mean, she got out of the water with a either jellyfish, I'm not really sure, but 9 minutes down, and then just mowed through the women's field, had a historic cycling split, and then went on to win. So she knows how to win, and we saw her World Championships in Nice, and she's just remarkable. Lucy Charles has been biting her heels for a long time. She likes to lead from the front. I think she's a brilliant athlete. Miranda's won here. Annie Howe is real fast. We saw her 2 years ago in South Africa getting off the bike, and she ran 1:14 for a half. So, she has a little better legs on the bike and is able to put together a solid run. The other women I just mentioned, with the exception of Miranda, haven't had their best run, at least I don't think, here. And they may need a 250 run to win. So wild cards, I don't really like to maybe go beyond that, because I think the field is deeper than 4 women. And it's deeper than 4 men as well. I mean, Frodeno and Sebastian Keeling had a great run in Nice, as fast as 70.3. He's won here before. Alistair Brownlee is... he's phenomenal. One of the very best athletes we've ever had in our sport. And people say, "Oh no, he needs experience," and da 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 da. That's nonsense. He could win. Right. We'll see. Yeah. Mark.
Ditto.
That's the easy answer.
Here we go.
No, like Dave said, there's the clear favorites, and then there's probably 3 times that number of people who, out of those other ones, there could be somebody who could just all of a sudden make that jump, and people will go, "Oh, where did that guy or that woman come from?" But in reality, if you look back at the results, and everybody will, if something like that happens, and go, "Oh yeah, that makes sense, because they did a 750 in this race, and they ran a 240 marathon, or whatever it is." That's what I love about the Ironman, though. It's so unpredictable.
Right. And I always say it's predictably unpredictable here.
Yeah, it is. And as I heard Paula mention last night at the Legacy banquet, you never really have it fully figured out. It's such a complex race that you can get elements of it right, but there's always going to be something that shows up on race day that you never imagined that you would have to deal with. Yeah. Whether it's your body or a competitor that's doing something unexpected, or maybe something mechanical happens, maybe your nutrition isn't working right, or whatever. But those are just those moments that you can either derail you, or you can just keep turning them around and bringing your race back to the focus of why you're here. Right. And really just embracing the immensity of racing on the Big Island, the intensity of it. Today, you would never think of it as intense. I mean, we're inside because it's raining, and we haven't had rain since I got here on Sunday. It's been absolutely clear, brilliant. The volcanoes aren't doing anything, so the air is crystal clear, absolutely gorgeous. And then today, we woke up, everybody's doing the underpants run, which Dave and I...
Did you guys do it?
We opted out of one more time. Because,
mine are too small.
Yeah, we'd get banned. So anyway, and it was dark. It's raining, and so race day, who knows? Okay, so we've got a few live questions coming in for you. So we have a question from Jim. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce your last name, Jim. I'm sorry, but his question is: do you think the current course might be easier than the old course?
Oh boy, still the same distance. I think the difficulty maybe in both courses is that Elite Drive is warm, hot, humid, and people are really kind of overzealous at the outset of the run. They heat up, they get out on the Queen K, which I think is easier because you've got a breeze. So that is all really much the same. However, on the run in the old days, we were all the way down at the end. It was a Kona surf, and I actually rode down that hill the other day. I hadn't been down there in a long time. I said, I just want to see the severity of that hill coming out basically from the sea up, and it's about, you're sort of grading up about maybe 150 meters.
Mm-hmm.
And I would guess it's probably 10 or 11% at the top, and it continues to go up for another 3/4 of a mile. So that was the outset of the run in '89. That's hard.
Right.
That is quite difficult. And then you're coming down a sort of a steep pitch, about 10% as well. Elite drive all the way up. You're out Palani, just like they're doing today's race. The other, then I'm not saying ours is more difficult. We did go 1.5 miles beyond the airport, and people can't fathom that. So when you saw at the time Bud Light out there on that big can, it was out in the desert, and then we turned around. It was roughly a 10K or 10 miles, 16K coming back in.
Mm-hmm.
So as you made that turn, and you thought, oh boy, there's a long stretch of road ahead. I think psychologically, that part of the course that we did in '89 was difficult, more difficult.
Right.
Paula mentioned yesterday, which I think is probably accurate, the first 4.8 miles in town goes up and down on the bike.
Mm-hmm.
And that's difficult. It's a non-rhythmic part of the course. People come blasting or trying to go up Palani Hill on the bike,
Mm-hmm.
and we used to do that as well. But you see them come around that turn, make a right hand. It's 9%, so a lot of people are over-geared.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw Sebastian Kienle do this the year he did not win, and he made up an extraordinary amount of time, at the outset of the bike, closed the gap, and then he was shot after that.
Mm-hmm.
So if people go too hard at the outset on the bike, I think it can be their death sentence. So it's hard to compare.
Right. On that note, what would be your go-to advice for people who are racing out here for the first time, racing for the first time on Saturday, their first Ironman World Championship? Putting your coaching hat on now. So.
You know, the people come here for the first time and they think that they're starting from ground zero, but
Mm-hmm.
the reason they're here is because they have experience.
Right.
You know, either they earned a slot in a race, maybe they're here on legacy, but either way, they have experience and they know how to race the distance. But the best advice I give for people who are here for the first time, I think, is to try not to judge how they're feeling and the experience they're having. Try not to compare that to any of their other races that they've done, because this is such a unique place. The experience is different. Like when I was racing here in the early 80s, this was the only Ironman that I did. And so I knew whether I was having a good Ironman Hawaii or a bad Ironman Hawaii. And then when I finally actually went to Germany and did Ironman Germany on a course that was, the surface on the road was smoother and better. It was faster, it was cooler, and it was so much easier. And I thought, if this was my Ironman experience and then I came to Hawaii, this would seem monumentally difficult.
Right.
But this is just what I was used to.
Right.
So I just try to tell people, try not to judge if you're having a good day or a bad day. Just have the best day you can. And then when it's done, you'll be able to look back and go, oh, wow. You know, because if they're comparing it to these easier races, they could be having the best Ironman Hawaii of their life,
Mm-hmm.
a really good race, but they're thinking they're having kind of a lousy day.
Right. So it's all about staying in the moment and being present. Right?
Absolutely.
Dave, your words of wisdom?
Yeah, I mean, I think the commonality of any race or any training day is we know physiologically how your body's adjusting or not. Mm-hmm. And so whether you're here in Kona or you're in Germany, as Mark was reflecting, there's moments in every single race where you're struggling mentally because you're getting the physical cues that aren't harmonious. So you're thinking, oh boy. And we're all used to that. But I think what happens here is that people make a mountain out of a little molehill. They feel bad, and therefore they're saying, oh boy, I'm really falling into this negative abyss, and I'm not going to get out of it. And I guess my tip is to recognize that you are going to have these elements where you're going to be throttled a little bit. And I always tell people, just do the simplistic things. If you think about doing a physical inventory and not thinking about the magnitude of the race or the distance that's left, and relaxing your face and your shoulders and your arms and just trying to get in a flow and rhythmic pattern, you're used to doing that. So do it here.
Right, absolutely. So obviously there's 30 years passed since you guys were racing, and in those 30 years we've had a lot of technology changes. One of the questions we've had is about power on the bike, and how do you think that's changed the race? Does that make the race different? Does that make the race faster? What do you think about power on the bike?
I think it's a great tool. I use it in coaching the athletes, and I think it's a wonderful tool. But I also have the athletes that I work with take it off. I have them take off the wristwatch or whatever metric they have, and to say, okay, we want to hit X power. Let's say it's 250 watts. Go out and do this on this particular segment. Download it later, look at it, but don't be tempted to look at it while you're doing it. Right. And I think the whole chasing the power thing can be a false indicator of performance. And I remember Jan Frodeno was talking about, power, looking at those astronomical numbers isn't necessarily reflective of speed, because the bikes are rockets now. The wheels are tremendous, the componentry. So they're more efficient with less power. And that's really what we want to see, but they're going darn fast. So I think two things. One, don't be, for lack of a better word, a slave to your metrics. I think that intuitive nature of what you're capable of doing, and you're superseding that in the biggest race of the year. If you've got a 3 to 5% area where you can go above, and that quite often can happen, that's what you want to exploit. If you're limited by a certain number, I think it's really wrong. And we've seen this over time. So I think there's a lot of pluses. I guess my suggestion is sometimes not go back to old school, but let your body allow you to read the rhythms of the race.
So for your coaching clients, do you advocate them, if they have a power meter, do you advocate them using it for this race or for any Ironman? Or
I have a little bit of both. So sometimes I have people look at it. Sometimes I have the same suggestion that I just mentioned.
I kind of like to have people gauge their power against heart rate. Right. So like if it's very cool, you can push a much more power at the same heart rate than you're going to be able to do out here in Kona. So if you're just going by power, you're going to override. You're going to go too hard because your body's not only putting in this physical effort to move the bike, but you're also having to dissipate heat. And that elevates your heart rate. It puts you into a higher stress kind of state. And, I think we saw it last year because you had this incredibly fast year, right? And so everybody was trying to stay on their numbers and do their thing. And on a relatively easy bike year, the run times should have been phenomenally fast. However, I think there were only 3 men who went under 250,
right?
I think
that's right.
And so if people had maybe not been a slave to their power and just ridden a little bit more within the rhythm of the race, then you would have seen 10 guys under 250 or 12 guys or 15 guys under 250, because that's kind of a benchmark. If you're under 250, you're on track to be top 3, top 5. If you're under 245, you're probably going to be top 3, in the marathon. And if you're under 240, well, then you're winning the friggin' race. But almost.
You stand a good chance. You think you stand a good chance to win the race.
And poor Bart Arnault's last year, sub 8 hour Ironman in Kona, and he's getting second place. Ouch. But this race is certainly, you can use metrics and numbers to kind of set your trajectory. Trajectory. That's a friggin' hard word to say.
It is, yeah.
Trajectory.
You got it.
But at the same time, it's really good to tune into your body and let the numbers go periodically and really just figure out, am I giving the best that I can and be sustainable throughout the race? Is it too much? Is it too little? And you do these fine-tune your effort, your pace, what you're taking in, your nutrition, all that throughout the day. And those little micro adjustments turn into 15 or 20 minutes in difference in your time.
Right.
And if you're just looking at a number, you're going to be blinded to what your intuition about your body's telling you to do.
Yeah. So we've got some good live questions coming in here from Chris Cogswell, who asks, do you think this course is better suited for strong swimmers, strong runners, or strong bikers?
I think all three. Just put them all together. What kind of silly question is that? It's a triathlon. It's not an individual race. Come on, Chris. What sport are you doing? It's not bowling. Polish all three.
Okay, next question. What are your points in the race? What are the points in the race where you should find a moment to recover because there's a hard section coming up? Is that possible at Ironman Hawaii?
I don't think there is a recovery. Some people maybe try to recover on the downhill coming back from Hawaii, the little section there, especially if there's a tailwind.
Yeah.
But it's so short-lived compared to the amount of time it took you to get up there that it doesn't compensate. So you can't go into this race thinking there's going to be a point where I can recover. It's more about continually managing and maintaining your body's balanced state so that you're strong all the way through. That's my...
Yeah, I mean, I think people look at different skill sets they have. So some people can climb better on the bike. What kind of gear are you? And you come off that and you're on a false flat one, better on that. Mark talked about coming down a Javi. You know, you're not just tucked in. There's periods where you can't, unless you've got a huge gear, maintain your RPMs. But you keep your legs going so that you have a period where you have this little respite, but you're not completely recovering. I mean, that's kind of an oxymoron towards or counterintuitive towards a race itself. But I think you have to really look at your strengths, where you have moments where you can kind of just relax, take a deep breath, slow down your nervous system so you're not fearing that kind of fight or flight mechanism that can kick in where you're scrambling. And you see this certainly with the lead men and women in the pack, where there's a lot of scrambling. And I just think these people aren't calm, they're reactive.
Right.
So be calm and I think recognize your strengths and utilize them in the race.
And that often comes back to bite you, especially in the latter part of the race. I think if you are in that fight or flight state rather than having some deep breath moments and that kind of thing, which I think a lot of people don't necessarily always think about when you're racing an Ironman. But
I tell my athletes on the swim, on the bike, the first 3/4 of the run, have it be like a strong training day. But if you get into the mindset where you feel like you are racing, you're going too hard. Because like Dave said, that turns you into that fight or flight. It's anaerobic. You know, you start burning fuel faster. Everything gets tighter. You're not as efficient. Drop it back down just 0.5%, 1%, whatever, until it's just another strong training day like you have done hundreds of times already. You know, you don't blow up on a training day. You might not feel great, but you don't completely fall apart. Okay, this is just a strong training day. I'm on the bike. It's just a strong training day. Same thing on the marathon. Until you get to about 15K to go to the finish, 10 miles or so, I'm just in a strong training day. And then at that point, then you can just turn it on and sprint.
Yep. That's when you race with your heart, right?
Wow.
He's got all the lines.
No, he does. I've given him those lines before we came on air.
Oh, you guys are going to love this next question.
Oh, I bet.
Brian Risley asks, is there any chance that either one of you will race Kona again?
Oh, well, Brian, if they gave me a whole bucket of money, I'd do it. But the first 4 races I won, I got a T-shirt. And they said, hey, we like having you out here, Dave. Could you come back again? I said, yeah, I got a T-shirt. This is amazing. I'm not being silly. I mean, I got some trophy. I'm not really sure. So, no, I'm not going to come back and go again. I think my days are done here on Kona.
It would be so disappointing for everybody, you know. I want to live the past.
Right. But you guys do know, obviously you have a lot of coaching clients and you both coach professional athletes. So it's one thing winning the race as an athlete, but it's also one thing coaching an athlete to win the race or to podium in the race. Dave, obviously you've coached Christy Wellington to a number of titles. Tell us a little bit about that, the secret to coaching somebody to a great Kona. Well, there are a lot of great coaches out there who have athletes who race phenomenally all year, but then they never unlock that great performance on the day.
Well, I think, let's use Chrissy. I acquired her when she was talented, and she'd already won here. I couldn't pronounce her name the first year. I was covering the race, and I kept calling her Chrisella or Kristalina or something. I didn't really know what her name was, and then I finally got it right towards the end of the marathon. But she was magnificent day one. Christy and also Craig Alexander, Julie Dibbins, Rachel Joyce. I mean, they all had that conviction, and I think you just have to make sure that you're putting the physical package together that works on what they've done well. And I think as a coach, I always came into my coaching profile with an athlete asking them what works well for you. I may not necessarily agree with them, and I didn't agree with Chrissy 100%. So we wiggled a few things to what I felt were better physiology and a better formatting that she could follow throughout the year. And then hopefully you hit it on the nose when you come here. But they were all devoted. That missing link that a lot of the athletes don't have when they come to Kona is just the emotional and psychological confidence in coming over here. And you know, and I would say this if Chrissy or Craig were both sitting here, there's not an athlete alive that comes over here and said, oh, I got this in the bag. You know, I'm the champion or whatever. I can win this. I've done X another race. It's really, how can I do on this day, and how can I bring myself up to, you know, bring out that confidence. And I've used a pretty simplistic statement. You have to go into it regardless of your background. And Mark and I were very similar in '89. You never have a perfect template leading up to the race, but you know you're going to have a good race. Mm-hmm. You just don't know how good it's going to be. I mean, that was a feeling that I had, and it took Mark a while to get there. But after mastering in '89, he kind of knew the mental game coming out here, and was able to win in different formats and the other 5 that he won.
Got it. So we have another great question here. What kind of emotions do you have when you come to Kona now? And if you could tell your 1989 self anything, what would it be?
It's just a lot less pressure.
Wow.
You know, I got to do an interview today. Oh, geez. I'm fretting, you know. I would... And this is something actually that I finally felt like I got right in my final Ironman in 1995, was just to come here and be a little bit more relaxed. I mean, certainly you want to have nerves, you want to have tension, you want to have anticipation, because that's what brings you up to a level that you never do in your training. You know, you just don't get that same spark in your training that you get when you're here with 2,000 other people who are at the peak of their career, peak of their year, peak of their racing potential. Yeah. But at the same time, you know, you can reach that tipping point where it starts to strangle your potential. It weighs you down. You get caught in the anxiety of it, and you come up with all these scenarios that you're afraid of having to deal with on the race day, and you don't know what you're going to do if they come up. And finally, in 1995, actually to back up, I came here in 1994 and watched the race for the very first time. My son was born that year. And I didn't want my wife tripping, carrying our son along, you know. So,
oh, you should have done that, Mark.
Yeah,
we would have had a good battle trying to catch Greg Welch.
Yeah, that was, but anyway, so I watched the athletes going into the race. And I realized all of this stuff that's going on in their head is completely fabricated. There's so little of it that actually has to do with reality of what's going to happen on race day. So, if I was to tell my '89 self something, it would just be to, Lord, bring it down a notch, you know. Don't worry about so many things, because like Dave and a lot of people said, you have done the training and you can't figure it out until the gun goes off. And so stop trying to figure it out before the gun goes off.
Right. Dave, how about you?
That was very eloquent. No, that was excellent.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And so this is another one with your coaching caps on. Martin Feinstein asks, as you prepare for any race, what is your mental attitude towards that race? I.e., do you want to lead the race? Do you want to stay back and read what's going on up the road? Do you want to hit specific times? I guess he's asking, how do you go into a race and, you know, prepare for that race mentally?
Well, I think the whole time thing should be thrown out. And I think when you're watching the watch and the metrics and so on, that can really be confounding. We're like, wow, I'm off by 30 seconds on the swim. I can't believe it. And personally, going into all my races, I never had any metrics. I never had a wristwatch on, including '89. And it wasn't something that I was chasing. It was really, as we talked about, that sort of intuitive sense, and as the race unfolded, having Mark next to me in '89. But I think get away from that, because again, you probably overuse the word, but it just creates this clarity and calmness that you have inside. I always use the phrase that you did, Emma Kate. Do what you can do at the moment, and I think that kind of narrows it down. I brought this up the other day because the question, and I'm sure Mark has had this, what do you think about when you're, you know, at 110 miles on the bike? Well, I got 2 miles left. Well, he flipped it around. What if you've gone 2 miles and you have 110 left? And I said, well, that's like, you know, putting battery acid in your brain. That's nonsense, you know. So you have to segment the race, and I've shared this with a lot of athletes in any race, but particularly Kona, have different segments that you recognize, you've analyzed the difficult parts, and they're not necessarily equidistant. They're maybe 10 pieces on the bike that you can break down. And so you have these mini races within the race, and the same thing on the run. And I think that allows it to be more palatable when you're racing. And mentally, it allows you to say, okay, I got through that section. I've got this at the end. Mark was just talking about you've got 15K. Well, a significant part is when you're out of the energy lab, that's not a moment of destruction. That's a moment of opportunity. I have a 10K. Where are you on your 10K course back at home? That's only X amount of time I can do it in this. And, I always like to see the athletes finish with a flurry on the end and feel as though, I'm strong, I'm going to carry this in. Well, no one looks pretty at the end,
right?
But you want to maintain good form and good integrity and a good mental disposition.
Right. I think that's the key, right? We were interviewing Heather Jackson a few days ago, and she was talking about how the race is changing in that it's no longer about getting to, with 10 miles to go or 6 miles to go. That's where you have to actually really run and race now. And I mean, and so she's been changing her training up and training with real marathon, standalone marathon runners in order to allow her to have that kind of push at the end. What do you think of that approach? What's your take on that?
I always thought it was best to have your best part of the race in the last hour of it. And I saw that in Dave's earlier victories. Lots of them, 6 of them, starting in 1980, ending in 1987. He won 6 Ironman titles, uncontested, basically, except for one where Scott Tinley almost caught you.
It was kind of contested. I mean, you were in the race.
Yeah, but I was like fluff. I was just making you look good, by just being way out there, letting you close those 12-minute gaps. That was like, I hope you appreciate that, man.
Yeah.
But what was the question?
You kind of got diverted there. You were patting me on the shoulder, and Emma Kate had a very succinct question.
This is a great question. What was it?
Go to the next one.
Let's move on. Right. Are you enjoying Kona Race Week? I mean, it's a real being on the island. I think that was the part of the first question that we didn't get to, but the emotions of being back in Kona. There's a lot going on in Race Week. The buzz, as you get closer to the race, the buzz gets greater and greater and greater. There's a lot of people who are super pumped up to be here. How do you guys feel coming back?
This race has slowly built its history and its legacy since 1948, and especially since the race moved here to the Big Island in 1981, and it's become something that people way beyond triathletes look forward to seeing and watching and following on race day and following the events leading up to the race. I think there's just something about when you have a little over 2,000 people really focused on one effort, and we're all doing the same thing. They're trying to bring their best out by playing off of each other and using each other to elevate, as Dave and I did in '89. Neither of us could have had that performance if the other one hadn't been there. And so that's what's so special is you take people from all over the world, from every country, different backgrounds, different body sizes, different ages, different political beliefs, different religious beliefs, different ways of training. And all these differences get stripped away, and we're bonded together by this one amazing event where we try to start at early in the morning and cross that finish line before the closing bell. And it's such a bonding thing that brings all of us together as human beings in this incredible sporting event. And you might call it a battle, a challenge, an Ironman, but it's just a great day in life.
And you learn a lot on the way.
Well, you got a lot of time to think about things out there.
Figure some stuff out.
Yeah, and hopefully you figure it out, and hopefully you don't think too much, because I always found, the best, most powerful place to race from was when I was actually just quiet. And when I was quiet, then I could tune into what my competitors were, how they were feeling. I could tune into the energy of the island. I could tune into my own strength and hopefully find the answers of how to overcome my weaknesses. And you're really stripped bare out there in the sense that you just can't hold on to that pumped up feeling of self-confidence. Self-confidence in the Ironman, true self-confidence is when you just are willing to surrender to how the day's unfolding and to manage it the best you can and give the best effort you can on that day, and that's a success.
We've got some great questions coming in. Barbie asks, in your opinion, has Ironman changed much over the years, and if so, for the better or worse, and how?
Oh, that's you, man.
No, well, that I have to be careful on this one.
Okay.
I think the as Mark said, the simplicity of this race is that there were only a few Ironman races around the world. Obviously, this was the Wimbledon, always has been the Wimbledon, and Hawaii itself is iconic. A lot of people in the mainland don't think of Hawaii as one of our states. It's so unique. So when the Europeans or South Americans or folks around the world travel here, and also from the States, and they know the history. The history itself elevates, I feel, the potential of people, but it also elevates people to the point where they lose this sort of calmness. Mark and I were at the parade the other day, and we stood at the sort of the finish line coming to the expo, and we just decided, we know that the people are excited about this, and we didn't do this for our egos. We said, that they want to. They want to see us. They want us to take a picture, and everyone's coming up sweaty and greasy and everything else. And
that's the beauty of Kona, huh?
Yeah, we're hugging all these people that have just finished their last run. And we're thinking, oh my gosh, how about a shower? But the energy level is magnificent, and the moment of where they can kind of come back and just, as we've talked about, without being repetitive, and have this clarity before they start is really key. What I would do way back when was sit on the pier, and I think everyone's very, very nervous. You're racked with nerves, but you want to be able to have peace within yourself. I would sit down, and we were allowed at that time to just jump off the pier, so I just dove off the pier, and I knew as soon as I got in the water, I was kind of a honeybee, so it would be amped up again, and people were surrounding me, and I thought, oh gosh, this isn't very calming. So, but I think people have to find that moment where they can just say, hey, it is a good, hard training day. Here I go. I'm nice and relaxed.
Talking of training days, you guys obviously coach a lot of people who race Ironman. What would be your go-to brick workout that you give people when they're preparing for, what's the signature Mark Allen workout, signature Dave Scott workout when you're preparing athletes for an Ironman?
The brick workouts that I give people are probably a little different than a lot of other coaches. I like to have an athlete do their long ride and then get off the bike and run, but not very long, anywhere from 20 to 50 minutes, maybe even an hour. I don't have athletes do really long runs after any kind of bike ride. And the main reason is if you do a long ride and a 30K run or whatever, it's almost like you've done an Ironman in training, which is really demanding on your body. So you're trying to train that transition so that you're patterning into your body that when you are done with your long ride, it's not time for lunch and a nap. It's actually time to go for a run. And, even a 20, 30-minute run will make that trigger come to life in the race so that when you get off the bike in transition at the pier here in Kona, you're ready to run. You're not ready to stop and take it easy. And that's really, for me, the focus of what the brick workouts are for.
Similar in a lot of ways. I agree with Mark. I think when you put a double combo, particularly a longer run on a long bike, it's obliterating. I have a lot of athletes that, and I've found that they're able to recover in doing this. I do some run bike runs. So we start them, vary the pace a little bit on the outset. They're fresh on the run, and maybe this is midweek or a Saturday or Sunday, and then they do a medium distance bike and then a run typically shorter on the end as they're coming off. I quite often, even on minimal amount, I'll do 30 minutes up to about 70 minutes on a run, the second run, but we're not running 2 hours. So I found that they're able to recover from them. They're able to hit the pace, the sum of the two runs, if that's what we're looking at. I quite often swing the pace a lot, so they're going much faster than their Ironman pace, closer to their 70.3 pace. So they have some higher efforts in there. But that run bike run has done, I'll say, well with a lot of athletes, and I think the recovery and the resiliency in training, particularly as you're getting closer, you can't be overzealous as a coach. And as Mark said, and saying, hey, we're just going to do your last long day. Let's ride 5 hours and run 2.5, and let's see how you do. A lot of them will have an extraordinary day, and they'll be flat here at the race.
So, Barbie's asked another question. Knowing what you know now, what's something you would do differently, whether it would be in training or on race day?
Mark, go ahead. You're just right there. It's on the tip of your tongue. I can feel it.
I'd have a faster bike. I'd buy one of these killer machines that you got nowadays.
Yeah, imagine if you could do Back to the Future and you could take one of these super bike rockets. And...
because of the 1989 thestory.com, Scott's picked up a bunch of old photos of us, and our equipment and everything. And, the bikes were archaic compared to what the athletes have now. And I think it would have been really cool to ride a bike that would have just made 112 miles so easy. And I mean, you ask about the course. I mean, it is so much easier now. I mean, this pavement, it's smooth as glass all the way up to Javi. There's no wind anymore, and there's grass everywhere. When we raced,
it was lava.
It was
all
pure
lava.
black lava.
Yeah.
I think it just cooled from the last eruption. So, it's just kidding.
All right, guys, I think we are wrapping up here. That's all we've got time for today. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to our sponsors, Gatorade Endurance, and enjoy the rest of the week here in Kona. Thank you very much.
1989thestory.com. Check it out.
You got it.
Thank you, Emma Kate.